All right. So we're gonna, again, as I mentioned, we're gonna keep on building classes and interacting with classes. So with that, I'm gonna create a new class. I'm gonna call it a new file called employee.py. I'm gonna open that up as well. All right. All right. So I'm gonna create an employee class. And there's each employee is going to have specific attributes about them, different instance variables, class variables, different instance methods. And we're going to talk about some other class methods and static methods. So with that, if I wanted to create a class called employee, what should someone say? Tell me what I should type to create an employee class.
Keyword class.
And then whatever
Pascal
then
case name.
Yep. So I'm going to call it employee. All right. And what are some attributes each employee have? So I work at Platoon. Some other people work at, other companies. What's one thing? What are some attributes that each employee has?
ID.
So ID.
Name,
it's first name, last name, ID,
job title.
job title,
Start date.
Start date. There's a bunch of stuff. Got salary, start date, salary, title, division, all kinds of different stuff. Location, where they're located at. So if I'm going to instantiate a new employee, I'm going to have just create several new attributes. Where would I do that at? If I wanted to create a new employee, where would I pass in those initial values? What method should I use?
Your dunder init.
Or dunder init. So def dunder init. So this is the initializer. And the very first argument I always pass in is the self keyword, because that refers to oneself or an instance of an employee. So I'm going to say like first name, last name, job title, and salary. That's good for right now. And I want these to be instance variables that I have access to throughout the entire class. How do I create an instance variable?
Do self first name equals first name.
Yep. So the self keyword refers to the instance of an employee, and I have access to this instance variable throughout the entire class in all the methods without having to actually pass it in. So I'm gonna last name, title, and salary. I'll also say an email, because most organizations have emails, and I don't have to pass in that email. I'm just going to automatically generate an email, because typically when you join an organization, they automatically generate an email for you. You don't have to like create your own email. So I'm going to call this first name, period, last name at email.com. So this is another instance variable that I'm creating that just is automatically generated inside the dunder init method when I initialize a new employee. All right. So with that, let's just go ahead and create an employee. Employee equals employee. So creating a new instance of an employee. I'm going to say it's Tom. Preet. What's title, instructor. Just say my salary is 55,000, and that's good for right now, I think. So if I wanted to print employee, my email address, I can go ahead and do that. So if I wanted to, I can do Python employee. And there you can see my email address. I don't like that capital. So does anybody know the built-in method to uppercase and lowercase?
Lower.
Is it just,
low to upper,
is it lower? Or is
Lower.
it
lower.
like so?
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you. Oh. So if I did that, there we go. That's something I want. Okay, cool. So I've got these instance variables and all that. Now I want to actually create what is called an instance method. So I'll just, I don't even know what I should say. Say hello, and this takes in the self keyword. And I just want to print self right now. So I'm going to say hello, like so. All right, so I'm going to run that. What did it do? Whoop. I'd say none. Do I not have access to? Oh, so again, this is an employee instance referring to self. Whereas if I were to just print employee, or like EMP, well, I think that would be the same thing. So when employee is an instance, and when I refer to self, that refers to the employee instance. So the self keyword refers to the instance of the employee. So I'm just going to return, hello, my name is self.firstname. And again, this is, I want to do string interpolation by doing the F string. And I'm, so I'm going to do double quotes. I'm an self.instructor or title, like so. So if I were to go ahead and run that again, it says, hello, my name is Tom, and I'm an instructor. And right here, I'm printing just the employee instance. All right. Can anybody tell me what a class variable is and where we typically define them?
It's above the under and it, so everything could have access to it. Kind of like right below the class keyword.
Okay, so I generally declare my class variables up here, right underneath the class where I define the class. And when you say everything has access to it, can you kind of elaborate on that?
Yeah, I guess it would have global scope. I don't know if that's the right word, but
I don't, yeah. So I understand what you're saying. So class variables are accessible through all instances of the class. And those values change if they're the same throughout all instances. So if I were to
They
say like,
also,
go ahead.
also the class variables are available to every method in that class.
Yep, exactly. So I also have access to all the methods. I have essentially access to this throughout the entire scope of this class, as well as throughout every instance of this class. So for example, I want to keep track of how many employee instances are created in my company, let's say. So every time I create a new employee, I want to increase my employee, or I'm sorry, my number of employees class variable by 1. So inside my dunder init, which is automatically invoked every time I create an instance, I'm going to increase my employee dot number of employees instance, or my value by 1. So if I were to run that again, everything's kind of the same. But if I wanted to check employee number of employees, there's one employee. If I wanted to create an employee 2, if I created 2 employees, now employee number of employees is 2. But even if I access, again, I have access to number of employees throughout all instances, as well as just from the, if I just run employee 1 number of employees, I also have access it in all the instances, I think as I just said. So employee, number of employees, there's 2. All right. Questions about class variables? Oh. All right. So say in my company, I have like a basic raise amount that I give everyone every single year. So like annual raise amount or percentage. And I want to, every single year, I increase everyone's salary by 3%. So that's across every employee inside of my organization. So across all instances, every employee will get an annual raise percentage of, I guess, 3%. So their overall salary will increase by 3%. So I'm going to create another method called def give raise. And this is, again, instance method, which will increase an instance or an employee instance's salary by 1.03%, or I'm sorry, by 3%. In addition to, I might want to give them bonuses. So if they exceed expectations, I want to give them a raise on top of just their annual percentage. So I'm going to say bonus, and the default value is 0. So if I want to increase an employee salary, I can run salary def.salary times employee dot annual raise percentage. And then I can also do plus bonus if there is any. And then I can just return self.salary. So it's 2022. I'm going to give, employee 1 a raise. I'm going to say give raise and invoke it. And let's say I did pretty well this year. I exceeded some expectations and I got an additional increase of $2,000 in addition to the 3% annual increase. So if I run that, so now my salary with the 3% increase is $58.60. And I don't like to have that 0.0 in there. So I'm just going to say, make that an int. And that should get rid of that. Cool. Any questions about instance variables, class variables, instance methods so far? No. All right. So, but what if I wanted to change a specific value? So maybe I wanted to just update the annual raise percentage. Say, because inflation is ridiculous this year, 7%, I think I read, or 9%. What is it, 7% or 9%? Does anyone remember? 7%. So if annual raise percentage, so if I give everyone a 3% raise, they're essentially getting a pay deduction. So I should probably give everyone a 7 or this company should give everyone a 7% raise just to keep up with inflation. So if I wanted to just update the annual raise percentage, I create a method to update the annual raise percentage. I don't want to use an instance method to update my annual raise percentage because instance methods are associated with each instance. I want to create a method that's associated just with the class. So I'm going to create what is called a class method now. So here, these are instance methods with the self keyword because they refer to the self. Instance methods because they refer to the instance of the class. But I want to create a class method that only associates to the class. So I can create a def set raise amount. And typically when we pass in the self keyword, we refer to the instance, but I want to refer to the class. So there's a reserved keyword called CLS. And I'm going to say like raise amount. And this class refers to the overall class. So just like if I were to print out self here, it would refer to the instance, where if I were to print out the class, it would refer to the class. So I'm going to say class annual raise percentage equals amount. However, I need something else because the syntax is really nothing about this syntax and this syntax that's different other than this CLS. So I need to add something else to this method to tell it, hey, I want this method to be a class method and to refer the CLS to link it to the actual class employee. And I'm going to create something or add something which is called a decorator. Has anybody heard of a decorator before? It's okay if you haven't, because they're kind of confusing. But the syntactical way to add a decorator is called this @ keyword. So above the set raise amount, I'm adding a decorator, and this decorator is essentially a function called class method. And a decorator is essentially extends the functionality of this specific function. So a decorator is essentially a function that takes in a function as its argument and returns another function. Don't worry about if that makes sense. But essentially what this here is doing from a syntax perspective, so class method is in fact a function. What it's doing is saying like some function equals class method, which is a function that takes in set raise amount. That's essentially what this is doing. Now, what class method actually does, you'd have to go into the code base and see what it actually is doing. But know that that's kind of like what a decorator is. It's a function that takes in another function as an argument and returns another function. And don't worry if you, again, you don't know, but just know that from a syntactical perspective, whenever you see this @ keyword, @ class method, @ property, @ static method, @ whatever, you can even make your own decorator methods. This @ keyword, it's a decorator, and it essentially extends the functionality of the set raise amount function. So, and I can check that by printing class. Well, before I move on, what questions do you have about decorators? Even though they're kind of confusing. And we'll get into a little more in depth into decorators later on as well. But just know that class methods are used to update essentially class variables. You go ahead.
I have a quick question. Yeah, I just did one on the side quick without the, I guess, what is the benefit to using the decorator? Because I was able to change my class variable without it. So I'm
Yes.
just trying to figure out.
So you can
Yeah,
definitely,
that's what I ended up doing.
yeah, you can definitely do that. There's nothing really wrong with doing that, but I think like the best practice is to actually use class methods to update your, yeah. So there's nothing saying you can't do that, and your code's not going to break or anything. But just know that these things, class method decorators are used to create or used on methods that are only associated with things like class variables and things that aren't associated with an individual instance. So if I wanted to run this, I can say like employee set raise amount, and I want it to be 0.07 now. And I can print employee 1 or employee 2 now. What is it? Annual raise percentage. And so now here, I ran employee set raise amount to 1.07. Came into here, set raise amount. I have access to this class. I'm printing this class, which you can see now is the employee class instead of the self referring to an instance. And so this is literally this doing CLS annual raise percentage is essentially doing the same thing as employee annual raise percentage. And so now I can see the annual raise percentage is now 1.07. All right. So again, class methods are used to change class variables, pretty much anything that isn't associated with an instance. All right. Any questions about class variables or class methods? You'll see them occasionally. You'll rarely have to, like 90% of the time, you'll be creating instance methods. All right. So if we have instance methods, we have class methods that have access to the class. We have another method called a static method. Static method, which is a decorator, which does not have access to the class or an instance of the class. So here I have access to the class by doing CLS. For static methods, you won't have access to any instance, such as like self or class CLS. But static methods are used to do some arbitrary things that really aren't directly related to the class or an instance of a class, such as like, hey, I just want to check to see what check what federal tax bracket this employee is in. Not even this employee, just based on some input salary. So I can say like check federal tax bracket, which passes in some salary. And now I can just run some logic on here. And so I can say like if salary, I don't even know what the federal tax brackets are. Does anybody know? Federal tax bracket. All right, got them here. So I can say if salary is less than or equal to 9950. I can return, I'm in the 10%. And now I can do a bunch of those. elif, was it 4525, 12, 86375, 22, 164925. What is that? 32, no, 24. If 209, 425, 32. 52360. Nope, 52360 and 35, and then else. Else, you're in the 37th percentile. So here, you can just run this on anything. So I can run employee check federal tax bracket, and I can just pass in, 50,000. And run that. It's in the 22 percentile, or even you can even run it on the class as well.
So the static method is just a basic function that you just separated from the rest of it.
Exactly. Yep.
I'm sorry, say that again.
No, you're 100% right. Yeah, think of it as just like a basic function or method that really is not related to the class.
Right, so the keyword static method just separates it from everything else.
Yep, exactly.
If you had to update that, how would you do that? You just update that that method right there?
What do you mean if I'd have to update what specifically?
Like if the tax brackets changed and you had to edit that information in there.
Oh, you'd literally just have to go in here and change it, like update your code. Now you could have a federal tax bracket class and have instance variables of different tax brackets. But yeah, so here with the way this is architected, you'd have to manually update the code here to update those.
All right, thanks.
Yep. What else do we have? All right. What other questions do y'all have? Cod, do you have a question?
No, I don't. Sorry.
Oh,
I've
there-
been working, so I've been trying to listen, trying to look at the phone, but yeah.
Sounds good. All right. All right. So let's talk about we're probably going to cover this a little bit later as well, but I think I mentioned it yesterday or a couple of days ago. So if I didn't want to worry about the placement of these, like first name, salary, I can instantiate this with like employee info, and employee info is going to be an object. So if I come down here and I say like employee one, and I have like first name, last name, what is this, title, what is the salary? So in here, this only takes in one argument, but the argument is a hash or a dictionary or an object. And I can access, it's actually, there we go. Oh. Oh, what just happened? Closing brackets. Can anybody see that error? Why is
Is it
that?
the
Is it down in
single,
the,
the single ticks or messing up the F string?
Oh, yep,
single
thank
quotes?
you. There we go, thank you. So if I comment out John, employee number 2, and instead of passing each individual placement, I can just create, again, a hash or a dictionary and just pass in employee 1 directly into here. And now, let's see. If I run that, clear, everything still works. So I'm passing in an object or a dictionary or hash, comes into here. I pass that up here. It extracts the values, first name, last name, title, salary off of that object and sets it to the values in here. So that's one way you can kind of avoid placement, just pass in an object with all the information you need. That's one way that you can do that.
okay, I've got a couple quick questions on that.
Yep.
One, I think you just answered that. Someone asked the other night when we started, what if one of those things you don't know right offhand, can you leave it blank? And that would throw it off if it was positional placement. So that's a way to take care of that. If you create that object and you don't specify one of those, but you have the employee info for that listed there, will it just ignore that?
So if it doesn't so if I add I don't know what else.
Like if down there, if you just omit, say, self.salary because you don't know yet.
Yeah, I think it will. So like date of birth or start date.
No, like in the class you would have it because theoretically you would have all that stuff, but what if you didn't? Down below when you're creating the object for that,
Yep.
if you just leave one of those out of there, it should ignore it, right?
Yeah. So well,
Or will it
actually
throw an
here,
error?
so it does throw an error. There's a couple of ways you can do that. You can mess with it. If let's see.
Okay, I was just wondering if that might have fixed that problem, but it doesn't. So
Yeah,
If you
hold on.
pass it as an empty string,
Let's see.
so like if you still had all those categories and then you just left one as an empty string, would it
yeah,
work?
that seems like it should work.
So right here, if I had that start date.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you have any value here, everything will still work. Well, I was just trying to figure out adding a ternary operator. So I could say so yeah. So now start date is null or none. You can add none like that, but let's go ternary operator Python. I've looked up this before. It's a little. So let's see if true. Yeah, I was just saying if does not equal, is it undefined or none? I don't think that works though. So let's see. Still doesn't work. So there are ways, there's another way we can do that. So you can do it this way. There's also something called Args. So Has anybody heard of Args, like star Args?
Yeah, just give it
Yeah.
basically leaves the number of arguments open-ended.
Yep. So I'm just gonna touch Args, kwargs. And we'll cover this later on as well. But if people are interested, so I can do like create a method called test args, which takes in what is called use a star or a star, and which is essentially like an array. So I can say print, or is it a tuple? Let's see, args. And I can say for item in args print item. So I can run print, or I guess I would just do test args. And if I just want to do any random inputs, hello, and I wanted to use maybe like an object of like 1 value, maybe even an array of like 5, 6, 7. If I clear the terminal, and run that, Python args. So yeah, it is a tuple. It's not a list or an array, but I can loop through it. So for item in args, so 1 random hello object. So you can use args to extract whatever item. So you can even say like if item, so if you're looking for a value specifically, like name or like, I don't know. Yeah, if you're looking for the value hello, so if item equals hello, you know, you can add to instance variable. If this was like in your init method, or like just do something with it. So it only runs once, so that value only gets once. You have once. What other questions? So that's one way you can do it. There's another value. So this it passes in a tuple. But what if I don't want a tuple, because tuples I have to loop through it. There's another one called kwargs, keyword arguments. So kwargs. So I could say type of kwargs. And this, if I just print kwargs, and I'm going to go back and grab that object, employee 1. And this is test. I'll do keyword arguments. And it uses the double asterisk. If I were to run that, if I do test kwargs and pass in, see if I pass in employee 1. I just want to see if this works. So it takes 0 positional arguments, but 1 was given. So when I pass this in, I just want to see if I pass it in like so with the 2 asterisks. Oh, what the hell is not going on? First name. What just happened?
Is it the asterisks in the print statement? Line 16.
Yeah, it might be it. Yep. So there we go. So I'm just going to get rid of that. I just want to see what this looks like. All right, come on.
You added a C.
Where did I go? Oh, thank you. See, when you pass it in, when you do that, it extracts it. So I pass in this object. What this is doing, it's essentially doing test kwargs, and it's running it like first name equals Tom, last name equals Preet, title equals, I guess it'd be title equals instructor, etc. So that's what this is doing right here. It's turning it into keyword arguments. So it's saying, hey, first name Tom, and this can be anywhere. Like, it doesn't matter like how it's passed in. So just know that that's another way we can pass in keyword argument or multiple values. You'll rarely ever. Oh, go ahead.
I just had a quick question. If you're going to access that key value pair, is the key going to be accessed not as a string? It's going to be accessed as a variable.
So if I
Or is
print
it, or would you access it? You wouldn't access it with string. I guess what I'm asking is, yeah, you're taking in the string from the object, but how would you call it? I guess. Okay.
So,
Yeah.
Like, is that what you mean?
Yeah. So
Okay.
yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense. Because I was wondering if it would recognize first name without being a string.
Okay.
But
No.
it has to be.
Yep. Yeah. It has to be a string. And there is a way. So just like we did employee with the args, you can do like args here or kwargs, and you don't have to call it kwargs. You can call this anything, employee info. However, this will cut down on your lines of code when you want to create instances or instance variables of the employee info. But what this will look like, it's not very pretty, I'll say. Essentially, if I wanted to do turn all these into instance variables, I would have to do self.dunder dict dunder. I think it's like update like employee info or something like that. And that's not very helpful for a developer to see. It's like, all right, well, I don't know what employee info consists of. So when in doubt, you want to make things easily readable as to what what's being passed in. So this is easily readable versus the other syntax.
Okay, one more question on that. If you scroll down a little way where you created your dictionary with the employee info.
Yep.
Okay, you have employee one there. Is there a way when you're initializing the instance of EMP1 with the employee class, instead of putting in that object there, right, as a variable, can you just put all the information of the dictionary in there and kind of skip a step of creating a separate dictionary?
Are you talking about like employee, like first name, like that? I'm confused.
I was thinking more like just the first name, just listing all of the
Just passing the object.
basically like passing in the dictionary as a parameter instead of creating it outside the.
like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. This is the same
Okay.
thing. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. What is it? Employee. Yeah. Oh, it's just start date is jacked up. Yeah, everything else should work. Yeah. All right. So yeah, just a quick review again. Instance variables are associated with each instance of the class. Class variables belong to every single instance that is created. You have instance methods that you can run that have access to all the instance variables, and you run these methods or you invoke them on the instance of the class. So by like running employee one dot say hello, employee two dot give raise, etc. Then you have these class methods that have access to the class, and you pass in CLS instead of self as the very first argument. And this refers to the class. And this is the same thing as doing employee dot whatever, but CLS refers to the class. And to create class methods, you need to have this class method decorator, or it will think that the CLS is associated with the self. So we need to make sure that that very first argument in that class method is associated with or belongs to the class itself instead of the instance self. So that's what the class method is for, because it changes the way this function works. Then also we have static methods. These are just like basic methods that aren't associated with the instance or the class. It just, they're rarely ever used. But yeah, you could just run arbitrary instructions on it. But you need to have the static method decorator. So to make sure that whatever, because you don't pass in self, you don't pass in CLS. So you need the static method. So it knows that whatever arguments you pass in aren't associated with the class or the self. And you don't have to pass in anything either if you don't want to. All right. What questions do you have about anything we kind of covered?
I'm just curious if you were to, we were talking about objects in Python the other day, and the key has to be a string, right? What if you tried, if you did it not as a string, would you get an error on that object, or could you think still access that?
No, you
value?
you would get an error.
Okay.
So if I just
Oh
see
yeah,
that,
it's already, yeah. Cool.
yeah, well.